Hello and welcome. Well, as many states and territories begin testing and staggering back to school in various different forms, this doesn't yet mean that life is back to normal. And for many parents, this unfortunately means that distant and home learning is not off our radars or just yet. And we all know how much everyone's been loving the experience of homeschooling so far. So this means, I guess, the pressure is still on for parents to keep their children engaged and motivated and learning whilst they still are facilitating remote learning outside the classroom. So to discuss this today, we welcome Jason Kimberley, CEO of Cool Australia, about the challenges parents face as they attempt to continue to inspire and motivate kids to learn from home. Now, a little bit about our guest. Now, Jason Kimberley is a father of 3 children aged between 10 and 15 years. Now, he launched Cool Australia in August 2008 to make education interesting, practical, meaningful, and engaging. And today, Cool Australia real-world educational content is used in 90% of Australian schools and has a growing footprint across New Zealand. Thank you so much for your time. We know you're a busy man. How are you doing?
Great, Rachel. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be with Kidopedia today.
Wonderful. Lots to talk about. So let's get stuck straight into it. Now, for a while now, I guess home for many hasn't been the place where the family comes back to each day to retreat and relax. It really has become a place of protection, if anything, almost like a fortress, if you like. And it's also been a classroom, it's been an office, it's been a playground, and everything in between. So I'd love to know, just at the get-go, how do you think parents can continue to support their kids in this unusual living environment that we're all experiencing at the moment?
Yeah, look, Rachel, I think a lot of it's about learning as we go. And I think it's very important to learn from our mistakes and what doesn't work so well. So I know from my experience that what I was doing 8 weeks ago, I'm certainly not doing this week or last week. So it's really a great opportunity to understand how your children learn and to really work with them. Some of the mistakes that parents make is trying to be a teacher. We're not
Yes.
trained. Don't try and be teachers. And really, when you get stressed, your kids get stressed. So if things aren't being completed on time, or if things aren't working out, or you've been shown up to not how to do grade 5 maths, which I just was this afternoon, it's not a thing to worry about. It's a thing to enjoy. And I think the ability to embrace this moment. I mean, who knows if we're ever going to get another time again to sit at home with our children for a couple of months and get really deeply engaged in their learning. To me, that's a real silver lining. I know it's frustrating at times, and I know it mightn't be our first choice. But when we sit down and take a deep breath and have a think about what's going on in our lives, I just think it's a wonderful opportunity. And what it does take is lots of understanding and lots of patience. And again, all these learnings about ourselves and about our children, about how we all cope with these different things. I think it's been a wonderful life experience for all of our kids, and also for us. And I know it's been a tough time for people who aren't able to get to work, and and that's really challenging. But also on the other side, I think there's lots to be learnt from the slow down pace of life and not dashing around everywhere. All those kids after school activities and the chess club and the running club and the whatever club it is, all these different things. And to me, it's been that opportunity to sit down and just take a bit more of a relaxed approach to things. And when you look at all the research about what does this mean, not being at school for 8 weeks and having the at-home learning, well, the data around this, Professor John Hattie from Melbourne University, he's Australia's sort of leading expert on these things. And Australia actually do 10 weeks less education than many of the leading countries who are ahead of us in the PISA international rankings. So by having 8 weeks at home, there will be some drop-off in secondary maths. Some kids might get behind, but apart from that, the data suggests that there's no real impact. So I know lots of people are concerned about that, but I'm a bit old-fashioned. I like to follow the data, and the data says that it's really only some kids in secondary maths that are going to have a bit of an issue. Everyone else can pick it up, and it's not like we're losing the time in isolation. The whole country, the whole world has lost the time. So relatively speaking, we haven't gone backwards. We've just slowed down a little bit and done it a different way.
What a great perspective that is. And it's just a glass half full, lens on everything. So thank you for sharing that. And it's really refreshing to hear. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. It's really been said that one of the biggest challenges I think that parents are facing is at the moment is just keeping the kids motivated. So I'd love to know from your perspective, why do you think this is so, and what advice do you have for parents that actually could help?
Yeah. Well, I think the idea around motivation, the problem with motivation is I think there's an unrealistic expectation for kids to be motivated the whole time. And
Yeah.
guess what? They're not. Parents aren't, kids aren't, no one is. So to expect a kid to sit down at 8:30 and smash out a full day of lessons till 3:30, and that's it, is totally unrealistic, and you're setting yourself up for failure. When it's not really a failure at all, I think you just really applied the wrong principle. So I'm a big fan of of creating the right work environment for the individual and giving them what's achievable. If your kid gets halfway through a lesson and has a throwdown or loses concentration, needs something, you know what? Let them do something else. There's nothing wrong with sitting down and having a read. And even the planning of the day can be really important. So, you don't want to be giving kids, introducing them to new maths problems at 2 o'clock in the afternoon after lunch. I can tell you right now, nothing is going to be absorbed. Things
Yes.
like maths and maybe some tricky English or grammar sort of concepts, do those things in the morning when your kids are fresh and their brains are alert and ready to go. And then in the afternoon, maybe after lunch, when things are a bit more relaxed, use the other side of the brain. That's when we can do the PE, we can do the art, we can do the creativity. And, there's nothing wrong with, defaulting to those things. So I think flexibility is very important. Don't have a routine that you plan, but don't rigidly enforce it. If something's not working, change it. I always say to my kids that if they're trying something repeatedly, trying to do the same thing over and over again, I say, Mr. Albert Einstein would have something to say about your approach here, kid. So if something's not working, change your approach. Keep changing, keep trying different things. Look at your schedule of the day. Some kids get really, it's a simple thing like put the kids' school uniform on, really helps some kids focus. They're in that mindset of I'm learning. I'm not at home mucking around with mum and dad and my brothers and sisters. I've got my uniform on. I'm ready to learn. So, there's just lots of little things that you can do like that. So keep them motivated. Don't expect 100% motivation all the time. I think you want to be motivated when you need to, focused when you need to, but to expect a whole day of motivation is you're headed for trouble.
Yes, a little bit unrealistic.
Yeah.
You've just mentioned before about scheduling, and I guess now I'd love to sort of just speak about this for a moment. But as many students, I guess, are going to start to embark on staggered return to the classrooms in various different states and territories, I guess we are slowly going to undo some of the good work that we've been doing with setting schedules and structure, which we've been told time and time again from experts that that's what we should be doing and have to be, providing the children. But this I guess this staggered approach and the backward and forwarding from homeschooling and the home environment back into the classroom may make the children start to feel a little bit unstuck. So I'd love to know from your perspective, what are your thoughts on this and how it could potentially just impact their, them and their education?
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of emphasising the positives. So, kids do love routine, but they also love, within that routine, if things are changing, they like to know what's going to be happening. So I'm certainly speaking to my kids and to others about talking to kids about, okay, what are the great things about going back to school? And we've had these conversations, seeing my friends again, playing sport again, doing the after school homework club or whatever it might be. All your child's interest is, I think it's important to focus on them. And as adults, I mean, we sometimes forget how intuitive and smart and switched on kids are. So if we've got a positive approach to our kids returning to school, hey, guess what? Our kids are going to have a positive approach too. So if parents are mumbling over the table saying, oh, I can't believe it's only one day. Why aren't they going back all the time? The government wouldn't know what they're doing. This should have happened weeks ago. Or why is it happening so quickly? It's all great to have these conversations, but if you want to have a positive frame of mind on your children, you need to have a positive attitude yourself, and that needs to be reflected in your conversations with your children. So again, focus on what the great things will be like. Returning to school, you can go back to the library. Some kids are that you can play, your ball games again, or whatever it might be. So accentuate the positives, and also, I think we can talk about some of the things at home that mightn't have worked so well, and say, oh, we won't have to do this anymore, and everyone can have that knowing smile of, we don't have to do that anymore, all squeezed around the kitchen table trying to do our maths work. So, I'm a big advocate of, looking for the positives, explaining away, any negatives, get the kids to ask questions of them, how you're going to cope, what's the bus timetable like, how the drop-off's going to go. And I think it's important to explain things will be different. Parents probably will not be allowed to go into the schools to take their kids and walk them into the classroom and give them a kiss goodbye for the littler kids. I mean, that's a reality. So, parents, I need to start having these conversations saying things are going back to how they were, but they won't quite be the same. And we all need to keep an eye out. And you could even write, an idea with kids, they love recording, write a diary. What are the different things about school? Let's talk about all the things that are different now that you're back. What are the things, what's better? What's not so good? What are the positive things about mum not walking you in? You're growing in your own independence. You can take yourself to classroom now because you're a big girl or a big boy. So all these different things, I think it's really important to find out reasons why it's actually a good thing and not a negative, and to have those conversations in advance with your children. Yeah. And again, they're a lot smarter and a lot more intuitive than we give them credit for sometimes. And I hope parents have really learnt that lesson in the last 2 months.
Yeah. So I'm just hearing really open, honest conversations with your kids. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Open, honest conversation. Who knew? Right, we need more of it. I mean, even we can even look at our federal government. We've had a collegiate response with our government, our state and our federal governments working together across parties. Guess what? We've got experts to tell us what to do. We're following what experts are telling us what to do. I mean, it's great, but it's also odd that we had to get to this before we had to listen to experts to tell us what we need to be doing in our world. But that's another conversation.
What should be instinctive. Now, we published your article titled "The Top 5 Problems Encountered by Parents and How to Combat Them." So for someone who hasn't read the article, can you please give us an overview what it's about and just tell us what inspired you to write it?
I think I changed that headline actually to challenges, because everything to me is a challenge, not a problem. There's a slight nuance in that, but I prefer a challenge than a problem. A problem sort of makes it sound like a bad thing, whereas a challenge is something we're just working through. So look, I think, it's about, keeping the kids motivated. And I think the great way to keep kids motivated is to be honest and open and upfront and talk to them about fears you may have, about different challenges, about how you can support your kids and how you love your kids and how, everyone's doing their best. And, it's not a time to get down on kids for not completing work. They're having challenges as well. They haven't seen their friends in 2 months, Yep. So it's a challenging time for all of us, but, their brains and coping mechanisms aren't necessarily as developed as parents and adults. So I think, keeping kids motivated is important. And I think the best way to do that is through love and support, not through getting grumpy that something hasn't been completed on time or whatever it might be. Yeah. Another one is screens, because obviously, with getting the information about the education and taking lessons home, they've got to come from somewhere, and most likely they have been downloaded from a website or been emailed by the teacher or whatever. So where does the screen start and where does the screen stop? So again, I think it's important to set boundaries, and the tricky thing is to reinforce those boundaries. And if they're let to drift, the learning can drift and the kids can drift. But I think screen time can be a reward or for good behaviour, or if there's poor behaviour, screen time can be restricted. And what I like to do is I like to actually ask my kids, what do you think would be a good penalty if you don't do this or do this regarding to screen time? So if you weren't to do this, what do you think would be a good penalty? And they'll often say things that they say, no screen for 2 hours. And I say to myself, that's probably more than I would have given you. But yeah, okay, no screen for 2 hours if you do this. So get your kids involved. And when they buy in and they're part of the decision-making process, they actually understand it. And if they've said to you, this is what happens if I don't do that, well, they've made the rules, not you. And it's a wonderful way to get kids engaged in that discipline and boundaries, particularly around screen times. Another thing is, I think, what interests your child. Don't try and stick a square peg in a round hole. If your kid is not interested in the subject, forget about it. Oh, seriously, forget about it. Do something else. Try and get to that same understanding, but through a different means or a different measure. If your kid doesn't like what you're trying, I think the days of trying to force a kid to do it because we think they need to do it is just not on. They're not interested, and it's a lot of hard work, and I think it's a bit of a waste of time. I think, parents obviously finding time to teach. You're working, you've got your own commitments, and you're at home trying to do your things. So again, that becomes a bit of a scheduling issue, but also, I've keep excusing myself from online work or stuff I do to go and help my kids out. And so I think if you can make a decision that, your kids come first, or your kids come first for between 9 and 3 during the day, and then you can focus on what you're doing is important, because it is very difficult to juggle all the different roles that you might need to be doing from working at home. And I think it's difficult to do everything at once. So allocate some time, excuse yourself from a meeting. There's nothing wrong with stepping out of one of those crazy Zoom chats for 5 minutes to go and help your kids. I'm sure it won't upset anyone. Or you can always say that my reception is not very good, and you turn off the camera and they just see your initials on the screen. In the meantime, you can nick off, make a cup of tea and help your kids out with their maths.
Look at you multitasking.
That's it, multitasking. Who knew if you weren't there for 5 minutes? I tell you what, it's been working well for me. And I think just to finish off on, Rachel, is keeping it fun and having a good time. I don't think I've laughed more in the last 8 weeks with my kids than I have in the whole, lifetime together. We've got out and put our runners on and gone for some big, long, 5K walks around the neighbourhood, and there's no one around, and we're wandering around checking out the parks and cemeteries and looking at some historical figures and seeing if there's any important people buried in the cemetery near us. And it's also a great, history lesson, and looking at, people who might have all died together, or what their cause of death might have been. And I think that the cemetery is a great place to have a wander around and keep it fun and have a look around your neighbourhood. So that'd just be a few things to keep in mind. But look, above all, don't stress. Your kids will feel it. You won't have a great time, and make it something that you can look back on fondly rather than look back on and complain about.
Great advice. And all of that information is elaborated in the article, which we'll have a link to in the introduction paragraph. But I'd love to know, in these last few weeks of homeschooling, how else can parents really keep their kids motivated? Is there anything else that you suggest maybe that they should be doing and considering?
You can have games and rewards, or you can set different time limits around things, and kids really do respond well to those boundaries. So I think you can make things into competitions. I've got at home got a system where I have a dot system where good behaviour gets dots added, poor behaviour gets dots deducted.
Oh, deducted.
At the end of each term, yeah. So at the end of each term, we look at all that, and there's a financial payout. So we don't have pocket money, but if you behave well and do your jobs, you get recognised. But if you muck up and don't contribute around the house, you might end up with not as much as your siblings. So I think,
is that something that you've got visually? Is it on the fridge or somewhere they can see all the time?
Exactly. It's in it's on a blackboard. Actually, it's a sheet of glass that's right on it with a whiteboard marker. But yeah, it's something in the hallway where they walk past and they can see it, so they know what might be coming their way, or they might see that they're not doing quite as well and need to lift, and they can start unpacking the dishwasher or something.
That's fantastic. Now, you mentioned earlier that it's much easier for children to learn if they're interested in the topic. And I guess there's, 2 ways of learning, either by repetition or making it fun. And if we had a choice, hands down, it would be the second option, of course. So can you tell us how parents can make learning fun whilst at home? Is there anything else that they can be doing at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think different elements, we're talking about screen time before. So there's a lot of, most things you can look up and find a 5-minute YouTube video to show you how, or to explain a scenario. And a lot of it is a lot wittier and a lot more insightful and conducted by a person more intelligent than me or the parent or whoever's looking at it. So I would recommend things like, if you go to your kid who's used to you saying, get off the screen, kid, you've been on there too long. And if you say, hey, why don't we go and look it up on YouTube? Let's find a really cool person explaining the theory of relativity to us in 5 minutes. So you can go on there, and there might be some household experiments. the kitchen is a fantastic place for learning. There's so many weights and measures and
Yeah.
timing and all different ingredients coming together. There's design, there's planning, there's, communication. There's so many different skills that are in the kitchen, particularly around preparing meals together. I'd say when all else fails, get your kids in the kitchen and do some cooking together. It's something, it's a life skill. It requires a lot of application, again, communication, design, concentration, maths, weights, measures, all these different things. And, we can do a lot in the kitchen. There's lots of scientific experiments. In fact, we've got a whole section on the Cool Australia website whereby we invite kids to create a whole lot of science experiments just from things you'd find in your pantry, in your kitchen at home. So, keep it interesting, keep it in touch with reality, and make it motivational. And, the time will fly, you'll have good fun, and your kids will have a whole new view of you.
And you mentioned earlier on about real world learning. So is this what you're talking about, or is it any different? So how can parents incorporate real world learning into
Sure. Well,
their days?
there's certainly the hands-on practical stuff, the real things, but also things going on, beyond our house, whether it's whether we're looking at environmental or social things. A lot of our kids, through our teachers, tell us, we really want to learn about racism. We really want to learn about homelessness. How does someone become homeless? What's the story there? What's happening with the plastic in our oceans? So we would present the kids with a data set around plastic and oceans, and the kids will do a calculation and put up the hand and go, oh, Miss, there's more ocean, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than there are fish in the next 20 years. And for a kid to come up with that determination by looking at the data sets, looking at the litter, looking at the recycling rates, understanding these real world scenarios that are with us now, is such a powerful way of education. We don't teach kids or what to think, but we do teach them how to think, and we really emphasize them considering all the different elements into their decision making. And why is ocean pollution a thing? What are the barriers to stopping it? And if they had their way, what would they do to stop it? And the kids are very ingenious on this sort of stuff, and they say, well, if something can't be recycled and if it isn't taken to a recycling, well, it can't be sold. Why would we even sell it? Why would we put an object into our waste system that doesn't disintegrate and doesn't become food for other animals like it does in nature? So, kids start questioning these things. They want to know why we're not doing a better job looking after our life support system, which is our planet. So, it's a good opportunity for kids to think about the world around them, and to understand that, there's maths and science and, behind pretty much everything that's happening. And let's understand that and find out why is it so.
And so with Cool Australia, it's been said that you want our education system to empower students to address the big social, economic, environmental changes, as you've just mentioned. And I don't think this could be any more pertinent than right now with what we've been going through this particular year with fires, drought, and now COVID-19. So is there anything else you can expand on this point of view and what else we should be doing?
Yeah, well, again, I think that practical understanding, when I was a kid at school, I used to put my hand up a lot and say, oh, Miss, when's this ever going to do me any good? And say, oh, it's in the textbook, I don't know, shut up, Kimberley, and keep learning.
You'd be challenging the teachers is what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I would ask, when's this ever going to do me any good? I can't see why I'm learning this material. And that was one of the challenges that we had when we started Cool Australia. I never wanted a kid to put their hand up and say, when's this ever going to do me any good? The answer should be right now. You should be learning about something that is going on in the real world. You should be having some valuable takeaway learnings and information about how the world works, rather than just learning some theory from a 20-year-old maths textbook. So an example of that would be, because we might have a year 8 maths teacher come to our website and go, what's all this got to do with me? And they go, year 8 maths, enter, and down drops 40 lessons that are all part of the national curriculum that need to be taught to kids. But the kids will learn about their maths, but they might learn their maths by measuring the melt rate of the Greenland ice sheet and implications on sea level rise for the next 1,000 years. And they will do those sums. They go, oh, sir, the sea's rising. I had no idea. And they've done all these calculations. So they've learnt their maths, but they've also understood one of the challenges that's going along around them in the real
Yeah.
world. So that type of learning is just so useful. We had a teacher write us a letter about a couple of months ago, and he'd had a group of his year 9 disengaged maths students doing an outdoor maths activity. And he said all the kids were very happy with the lesson. They were walking back inside. And he said a cohort of about 10 boys walked up to him and said, "Oh, sir, that was the best maths lesson you've ever taught us." And he said he puffed his chest out with pride. And he was walking back to the classroom. And in the next breath, they said, "It wasn't one of yours, was it?" And he said, "No, it wasn't." And they said, "Well, where'd you get it?" And he said, "Cool Australia." They said, "More of those, please. That was the best maths lesson we've ever done." So the point of that is the kids are still learning their maths. In fact, they're learning more than they otherwise would have, because they're outside. They're in a different environment. They're connecting to nature in this instance, or they might be connecting to some data about, whatever it might be. So the more you can relate it back to something the kids understand, whether it's about mobile phone technology. We've done a lot of work on, people being distracted with their phones and how they can, be in control of the technology and not let the technology control us. And that's one of the things through human history, is that we often invent technology, but we don't know enough about it, and it ends up controlling us before we
Yes.
get a good control of it, whether it's a massive digger or a huge jumbo jet, or a mobile phone, whatever it is. I've had the conversation with one of my kids today. I said, that device is in control of you. You are not in control of it, and I need to see some changes, and you need to prove to me that you're in charge. So we looked at the data on his mobile phone for the last week, his average hours, and I said, this graph needs to start coming down. Do you think you can do it? And he said, "I'll give it a go." I said, "If you're unable to do it by yourself, Mum and I are going to have to step in and help you."
Fantastic. So is it that you make all decisions on quantitative and qualitative data at all?
Look, some of it we do. Some of it's, sort of organic and it evolves. But yeah, a lot of our work we do with our research with our teachers and educators, and asking them what they do with our resources after they've downloaded them, how many times, they share it with other teachers, how many times they teach it a year. So there is a mixture of that, but also, focus groups are really important. And we obviously get all the raw data from our website as to what's the most popular lessons and, who's looking for what. But, the one thing that is for sure, the closer the link between the real world activities that happen around us and our learning. So it's practical, it's useful, it's informative. We're talking about things that we know and we're familiar with. It just makes the whole process of learning and understanding so much more fluid, so much more acceptable, so much more understandable, rather than talking about abstract things in textbooks that really don't excite nor entertain nor energize.
So look, you've given us some really insightful stuff today. If you were to summarize, I guess, your key messages for our audience, being families with children all around Australia, what would your key messages be?
Well, I would say be thoughtful. I would say be patient. I would say be kind. I would say when your kids return to school as students, I think it's important to stop and take measure of what a wonderful job our teachers do. And I think we should have a whole new respect for teachers and the work they do educating our children.
Yes. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time today. We'll have a link through to Call Australia and also the article that you've published, that we've published for you, and really hope for another opportunity in the not too distant future to have another chat with you. I've really loved it today. So thank you for your time.
Good on you, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye.
See ya.